conversation. And I will drop a couple links in the chat so you guys can follow along. But before we get into that, I wanted to do something for the audience. This book, it's called "It Always Seems Impossible Until It's Done," and I'm gonna flip to a random quote. I keep this by my desk all the time, and it's not about zero trust. I mean, might seem impossible, might never be done, but seriously, this is for those of you who are here with us today because this whole cloud native vulnerability management thing might feel a little overwhelming. We know it's dang confusing, and you might not know where to start. So let's do it. Ready? Totally random.
What are we gonna get?
How's it going? Do the big scene first, and then you can do the small scenes and have fun. It's great advice for life. I say it to my kids. Do the hard stuff first, and then you can go and do whatever you want. Bruce Willis.
thought you were going to say like Steven Spielberg or something. Do the hard scene first. Is that what he said?
I guess so. Um, but yeah, so and Ed also too, like, we're here to talk about some challenges, but I think before we get into the
Let's
articles.
stay with that quote because that's an interesting one. Like for cybersecurity,
Yeah.
there's two ways you can, skin the cat here. One is if you're investigating or sort of determining whether some mitigation process works, sometimes you might like to do it on some dopey vulnerability or something that's throwaway.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But Bruce Willis, noted cybersecurity researcher, is saying is jump to your highest priority thing and go fix that. I mean, you can see how that doesn't. Obviously, we fix the stuff that's really high priority quickly, but sometimes when you're testing, you wouldn't. Right? I
Yeah.
don't know what you think,
Yep.
but like
Yep.
usually I like to try new stuff on dopey things. But then, yeah, I mean, if there's a high priority Sev one, you do it at 2 o'clock in the morning if you have
Yeah.
to. Makes sense.
But
I'm just going after Joe's nerdy book there he's got there. So
Anyone wants a
yeah.
copy, let me know.
Well, I think Ed too to that point, right? Like, especially in this industry, especially with everybody saying prioritize, prioritize, but the challenge is like, how do you even know what is the hard thing? And without the right context, without the right connection, right, you could be spending a lot of time thinking that something over here is actually the most severe, the most critical. And I think the reason you brought up this book, Joe, right? The reason we're having this webinar, how many headbanging moments do we have of like the list, a pile of list of things to do, and you think you're making an impact, but you're not. And how do you even make a smart decision when this comes to it? And I know we're not talking tools and technology today,
No,
but
no.
just that challenge, right? I'm sure Ed, you've experienced that in your days and your teams, and how to keep people motivated to kind of keep trying to get that pile to slowly but surely sink down.
part of the problem is that in complex environments,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you got a SOC team that knows what they're doing. When you go to one of the lead analysts and you say, "How did you know that that was a high priority?"
Yeah.
Hmm.
A lot of times the answer is something like, "We just knew." And it goes, and in their mind, they're connecting the dots from this is the vulnerability to these tools are dependent on that to this could cause this to break to, oh my gosh, we have a whole business unit critical vulnerability, and they're kind of doing that in their head. And we can't, that's not a sustainable or scalable approach. But that's
Right,
how we
right.
all grew up doing this. There are always gurus who
Well,
kind of just knew. That's kind of an unstable approach. So we got to get away from that.
Well,
yeah.
and unstable when we look at, we just ended the year, right? Happy 2025. Welcome to the new year. And we look back on 2024 and the vulnerability database, right? NIST, another record year, another, I think it was 40,000 some, Joe, right? We looked at the graph the other day. I mean, well, perfect. Yeah, you have it on your screen. Like it's almost, yeah, there we go. Like, how could you even keep track? How can anybody keep track? And every year, every blog article, every news article you go to, record number of vulnerabilities. So, how do you even prioritize when the number keeps jumping and jumping and jumping and jumping? Like,
I wish that
that's
was my bank account.
yeah.
I thought that was like Tesla stock or something showing us there.
I
So
mean, look at that.
Yeah,
Yep.
you want to go
Hockey
res
stick.
that's not a good story.
Yeah.
That's not a
Yeah.
great.
And I
Um,
wonder, right, how many people are experiencing the same thing, right? I think one of the articles as we're preparing this webinar and we're talking, right, and we're talking to customers, like Joe mentioned, at events, and it's not only just the record number, but so much so that then how do we even keep up? Like this backlog from the people that we trust to put this information together, right? The fact that there even had to be a pause in the vulnerability database because there were so many, because we have to make sure they're accurate. Like even the experts, where all of us get our information are struggling. So how can any of us who are supposed to, come and do our job, build the tools, the technology to help do things, like this is a real problem, right, Ed? I mean, a real problem
If
I'm
you
sure
go
you've
to go
experienced.
show that Tesla stock thing again, that diagram. So that thing, if you show that to a bunch of grad students and you say, now, how do we deal with this? And then you pause and you demand an answer. There's really a one-word answer to how you put up with that. You wait, and then somebody eventually in the back of the room will raise their hand and get the right answer, which is automation. I mean, that's the only way you can handle scale. Because if you automate properly, then the scale shouldn't matter because you can keep up. I mean, if you can
Mm,
generate these problems, then I can handle the problems. It's when you have manual processes in your vulnerability management team or in your SOC where and I meet all these people as I do for a living. I yak,
mhm,
gossip, and coach and talk to these teams. And we'll ask them, how do you do such and such? And they'll always want to try to impress you by saying, well, I keep track of them. I have a feed that comes in and I review it and I call this person and we discuss it. And as soon as there's these human interactions that are going on, I'm not impressed by that. I'm impressed they're smart, but that doesn't scale. So when you get a diagram like this, it breaks somewhere in there. Maybe it already broke, but at some point you realize that it's not going to work anymore. So I hope for people who are listening here, if you have something that's manual, then it only scales to X, whatever X is, dependent on, your local circumstances. But eventually it'll break.
yeah.
yeah.
So Aaron, this is like, I want to talk about the article about the NVD and the fake CVEs, but like, how many of
Mhm.
these are real? So let's pop over to the situation that we find ourselves in here. Aaron, do you want to chat about this one real quick?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I even wanted to call out, Thomas, our friend in the chat here too, said not to mention, we're only on day 16 of the year. We already have 2000. So, off to another record start. I don't think this is the Guinness Book of World Records that anyone wants to break. But, even this, another article that we found, and again, sharing with Ed as we're putting together this article, but the fact that there was so many coming in that we actually had to pause, right? Like whether or not, are these true vulnerabilities? Are these ones that we need to have the process, right? This, to get the categorization, right? To go through to get the CVE number. NIST was literally unable to keep up. Like we couldn't even bring these vulnerabilities, all of these things that are being, submitted. We don't even have enough time to go through and make sure that they're accurate in order to give them to the organizations, right, to the tools, to the technology, so that all of us can be aware, so we can actually go in and prioritize and then, fix, remediate, mitigate, whatever we want to do. So another just crazy impact here of, it's not just us. And I'm sure, many of you, especially if you're sitting in your office or especially if you're remote and you're like, is it just me that's having this super big challenge keeping up? Is it just my organization? It's not. It's, the
Yeah.
databases, the people that we rely on, even last year, they had to take a pause. They literally had to pause to make sure that the processes that they had in place, that these were real CVEs. And that's a challenge. Like that's, that keeps people up at night for sure. So, Ed, I don't know if you had any additional
A
commentary on this one, but
couple of things.
yeah.
First off, I want to tell you a story about somebody I knew when I was a little dude, when I was a little kid. My dad was a computer scientist, and the guy who'd been at Bell Labs and then went to Stanford Research would come
Mm,
over. Really interesting man. He would read our eyeballs and tell us stuff. And he was a computer security researcher. His name's Peter Neumann, still around. And he started this thing called the Risks Index.
mm,
risks to computer systems, and he would keep track of them. I think ACM sponsored them. When I was a grad student in the 80s, 90s, I would read them. And he would post one a month, and then one a week, and then a couple a week, and then a few a day. And it got to the point where
Oh,
couldn't do it anymore. Like, think about that. It was like he was telling us about where computers would fail and cause a problem. And that was news. Like it was something that you could do as a forum.
Hmm.
I don't know when he might still do something, but nobody reads it because it's like, well, we have 1,000 a day. So that's the first thing. The second problem is that I think I'm a little contrarian in all of this. When I see the increase, I actually think that's a good thing. Like, I don't want people throttling because they don't want to annoy somebody who's running some open source project. Like, well, I'm not really sure if this is a problem, so I don't want to get, like sort of, called out
Absolutely.
on, hey, such and such is bothering me with this dumb thing. That's not a real problem. I may not know, I mean, if I see some problem that looks like a misinterpretation of IP source or something, then you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's always so evil if I'm not sure to bring it to the community's attention. And then, yeah, maybe it's not critical, but I thought it was. I do get the fake thing. There's no question that there's people
Gonna
who are
say. Hmm.
mischievous, definitely, and
Hmm.
maybe even malicious. I don't know. But I
Yeah.
do
everywhere.
Yeah.
think that it's probably a lot of those, like Joe, you were saying, how many are real? I don't know, but I don't think false positives are so always evil. And that's why I think having
Yeah.
processes that scale allows us to say, look, if there's an issue, raise it for God's
Hmm.
sake. We'll figure out whether it's an issue. But if it's manual, then you get pretty annoyed. Like, people running projects get ticked off. And they're like, oh, bothering me with all this nonsense. That's not a problem. What are you, an idiot or something? I mean, that's what you read in these narratives. And it's, again, none of it scales.
Yeah. Well, I think exactly to that point, what happens when it is malicious? And then there's this line that you're crossing, right? Because you raise a really good point. Let's submit it. Let's make sure we found this. Let's alert the community, right? This whole community of people who were trying to do good, trying to work fast, trying to build better, stronger applications, features, whatever it is. But what about in those cases where people take advantage? And that's the whole world, right? That's why we're all in security. But
Yeah.
that's another just punch to the gut when you're trying to trust, trying to do the right thing, especially when you have your long list to get through. And then here's a CVE that's fake and malicious, and now people are going and attacking something when you're just trying to do your job and fix it. Like that's a really crazy world to live in, to come into 2025. And again, another thing just to be prepared for. And that's why we have these discussions, right? That's why we bring in experts like you, right? To everybody faces them at different levels, and there might not be an answer now, but bringing the awareness and having these conversations. And I think, Joe, you mentioned this, like we'd also love to hear from all of you in the audience. Like please share, as we're going through the conversation, how you're tackling some of this in your organization as well. But I'll pause
Yeah.
there, and any response, Joe or Ed.
I was gonna say, like, I was just listening to you both right there, and it reminded me of Curl, which was, not too long ago, and
Mhm.
everything that you were saying was like carbon copy of the second article that we're here to discuss. I mean, this poor maintainer, he got so overwhelmed that he just pretty much gave up on his project. Um, so I want to just share my screen again here, give this one to you guys.
This is the guy who turned off and made it all read only. Yeah.
Yeah, read only. Yeah, that's what he did. Yeah. I mean, that just shows you current system. It's creating unnecessary pressure on the devs. I mean, is it the validation where we need a better process? All we like at the end of the day, all we really have is time and wasting it on like low impact stuff like that they're dealing with. It's it's just it opens so many other risk avenues.
It's
Just
the core issue here is that communities like open source have always thrived on members and researchers being responsible. That's
Mm,
it just the whole thing kind of breaks down when you lose that assumption. And
mhm,
we've all been part of those communities, and you tend to gang up on somebody who tends to be irresponsible. Um, and it can get real weird real fast. You've all seen that. But again, the the assumption when you're running a community is that the researchers and the participants are responsible. When that is true, then wonderful things can happen. You can build great utilities, you can share software, you can make progress. But as soon as they get so big, I guess I'm no psychologist, but some small percent of any group is going to be like, really weird, right? There's always going to be some bad apples when you
Mhm.
get big enough. And I think a lot of these projects are getting big enough that we're just seeing just the math of it is that there's going to be some people malicious. I just would again reiterate that when something's deliberately malicious and fake, that's different than somebody innocently posting something that they
Yeah.
might have made an incorrect assumption about. Those are different. The second is responsible, but maybe not experienced. The first might be super experienced and irresponsible. So the responsible part is what's so important. We've always had to have that in incident response, right? It's all, or in reporting, like when you find a vulnerability in a website or something, responsible reporting is what we all rely on people doing. The internet grew up because most of us are pretty responsible, and when you're not, you have these security issues and these coordination issues. So I think this article is a good case study in what can happen when a moderator gets pretty annoyed and just says the hell with it, which is apparently what happened here.
Talk about an ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
Um,
But
all
it's
right.
that responsibility, and that's a hard thing to check for. You can
Yeah.
check for competency. Like if you're a novice in an area and you start participating in a forum, maybe some open source project or something, and you're just not understanding, then you will self-select out of that group. I mean, what's the point? If you're not following, you're not contributing, you'll get it. Then you better go take some classes or something, go take a SANS class or something, or to just apprentice with somebody or get some help. You'll self-select out of that. So that's not the problem, but irresponsibility is a hard thing to test for. Um, there's no security control for that. Again, like what you guys do at the company at Aqua, like when you work with a vendor, when you're working with something that's automated, life gets better. You do have some help. And again, for me, when I'm, talking to teams either informally, and I'm usually, because I'm such an old dude, I'm usually talking to the managers now. But, usually with the managers, I'm always asking, take me through your automation journey. What are you trying to do? And if that's immature, then you're always going to have problems in this area. So that'd be my main. You started, Joe, by saying actionable stuff for people listening. Really go back and test how scalable your process is. Could you handle twice as much as you handle today? If we flipped the switch and next week it was double volume, could you do it? And if you say, sure, walk in the park, well, then you got a little bit of headroom left. But if you go, no, I do see what you mean, then it's good. 2025 be a great year to rethink that. Because if that diagram you showed keeps going, then I think it's going to go through the roof like climate change or something. It's going to go
Well,
top
I
of the
think
building. Well, then what are you going to do, right?
you made a really good point right there, Ed, right? Like this is shifting, right? If we have, I'm sure many of the organizations, and again, if anyone feels comfortable putting in chat, people that are in this cloud transformation, right, that are moving from this traditional on-premise. So, you and I have spoken about this before. Managing vulnerabilities on your lap, like endpoint or server, is so different than managing cloud native vulnerabilities. And that's really the point of our webinar today, right? This is what we wanted to talk about. But your point of like, if you turn the dial up, does it still work? I mean, that's really what a lot of organizations are facing in this part of, multi-cloud, if they're multiple public clouds, if they're in hybrid still, a whole total shift in how managing vulnerabilities used to be on some of these legacy systems, more monolithic applications, to moving now to, we want faster, right? We want to enable DevSecOps methodology, right? We want to secure, we want to include that security and, as part of automation, we want to go fast, 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 fast. But how do you do all of this, and how do you manage these vulnerabilities in sort of this we call it, I mean, it's not new for us, but maybe some of this new world of people who are just, beginning this transformation.
We got a little reprieve when, for a lot of companies, it went from monolithic to cloud,
Hmm.
the apps and workloads. You got a reprieve because like that whole shared responsibility thing that you get with Cloud Security Alliance, that thing
Hmm.
coming out where the infrastructure is covered. Like I'm not sitting worrying about patching Exchange servers, I mean that so life got better there. And you go,
Yeah.
oh, wow, I don't have to worry about theoretically like half the problems I used to worry about. But what you did see is everything became different. All of a sudden, like all of your comms utilities, a lot of the libraries, all totally different.
Yeah.
You had to relearn what all that stuff meant because you didn't have that, in a data center. Even if you're running an SDN, it just was different. Public cloud is different than private cloud. But now I think what's happened is it's kind of caught up.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, I want to patch Exchange servers, but I get a gazillion other problems because we've moved so much complexity to the
Yeah.
cloud that it's just gotten harder. And I think it's with AI and as we really start to multiply the ability of our infrastructure to do stuff, I think that diagram probably will keep going up. So you might as well just assume that it's
Yeah.
going to get out of control for anything manual. I guess that I don't think it's going to go down, right? That seems
No.
unlikely. I
And
don't.
let's not forget all the amazing things that cloud native allows you guys to do, the
Hmm.
innovation.
No, you belong there for sure. You want to be in cloud. Look, you want to use computing, right? You want to automate and build utilities and run workloads. And I mean, that's why we're all computer scientists. We want to use it and do it. We want it to grow.
Hmm.
But if there are going to be vulnerabilities and they grow commensurate with your increased computing and apps and usage, then you have to do something to deal with that. And it can't be, subscribe to a feed and read the stuff and decide. That ain't going to work.
So you can't assume that you're secure if you're in the cloud.
I would say, and I've said this a zillion times, you're better off than you were before. And I
Yeah.
know that's controversial. Like I've worked at a big bank, I've been on their board, and that would be a controversial statement. They feel like once we went to cloud, it was this evil transition that we were forced to do. But I think it's the wrong thing. You had this fake
Monolithic stuff.
veil of perimeter protection.
Yep.
Like, give me a break. Like that was just kind of a joke. Anybody who's a garden variety hacker knows that in the old days, when you hid stuff in a data center behind your firewall, that was just a layup to go in and and hit your apps. Now, if you do it properly in cloud, it isn't perfect, but it's better. It's
Hmm.
definitely better. Go find somebody who works in a nation. Say, go down to Columbia, Maryland, ask them, hey, is it easier now or harder? They'll tell you that the computing architectures now are better than they were 10, 15 years ago. I don't think anybody would dispute that. But it's not perfect. It's still a lot of problems, but it's better. So we do belong in cloud. It's just you gotta do the security part of it.
Well, then when
So
we were talking, Ed, right, like prepping for this session, you talked a lot about like it's just different. And so it's not one or better or worse or whatever. It's just
Is
different. And so I think you shared a lot of points with us just about, yes, vendors, but just shifting in like organizational responsiveness and not being able to make assumptions. Anything else, from as you were building teams, right, as you were running these organizations, as you were working for that teeny tiny telecom company, anything that as you were part of this transition, any, guidance or thoughts or best practices, anything that you would share with the people listening today?
Aaron, it could be dopey stuff like nomenclature between different cloud services. You guys deal with that because you handle and you work with all of them. I mean,
Hmm.
Amazon, Google, Microsoft called the same thing sitting on the table. You're looking at the three different names for that. It's you know what I mean? Like when you're cataloging vulnerabilities, then you
Yeah.
just multiply the thing you're tracking by three in terms of nomenclature, not the problem. Conceptually, the problem's the same, but they're calling them different things, and that's a disaster. I know CISO used or MITRE And
Hmm.
so these cataloging groups try to fix that. And your GRC and your vulnerability management tool and you guys, everybody tries to normalize. But I'm just saying, when you're dealing with these three different groups, they use different terminology. That's a very trite example, but it drives you crazy. And in the business I'm in right now, where we
Hmm.
write about these things and try and train and help, it's a disaster. You know what I mean? Like you guys have to deal with that. But
Yeah.
it goes up from there. Obviously, when you go dig into the underlying infrastructure, let's say there's some weird open source problem and you want to know whether or not it lies at the root of some hosted environment that you're working, say, with Google. And I don't know, you call over there or you read their blogs. It'd usually be their like Venables or somebody would post a blog saying, we don't have this or we do have this. But then you have to go read two other blogs to see if they do have this. You know what I mean? It's everything times three, and I'm ignoring Alibaba and Oracle and all these other
Yeah, right.
that also have clouds, but there's three big ones, obviously. But so all of that stuff in practice, the people who are listening to us today, I'm sure resonating that it's just flat out different. You didn't
Yeah.
data center that way. You picked a vendor and you work with them. Might have been VMware or something, but now it's all this, and we didn't even talk about SaaS, which is
Right.
just extends out as well. But just for cloud, it's complex.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. A lot of change to surf, if you will. And I kind of want to pivot to how the challenges affect specifically the security team and the relationship, you know, with continuing education. Like, um, what does it mean for me, the attendee? These changes, what do I need to do? Is there any like
Yeah.
opportunities for training or like how do I sharpen my skills to be able to, keep up with this stuff? Any tips or tricks there?
I mean, there for me, that you're singing my song there. I mean, I devoted my whole life to that. Here's the way that people should think about education and training. So, one end of the spectrum, there is super practical hands-on training that touches the technology you use every day. And my favorite would be Sands, and that I've always been friendly with that group. I think they're all, and there's others. You go pick your favorite stuff.
Mm.
But and I'll get you guys would do training for your customers on your platform. It is all right, everybody. Open your browser. Go to such and such address. Let's download the software. That's really immediate, urgent stuff. The problem is the half-life on that is short because the instant you change the software, change this or that, it's a problem. And that's why for something like that, I don't call that education, that's training. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you get some academic, in a master's program. Like me, I teach a master's program at NYU, pontificating about some general high level concept that might have a very long half-life, but you have to twist yourself in a pretzel to connect it to the stuff that you actually do day in, day out. That's why people get so mad at academics because, like, what do how does this apply to me? I have to interpret. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. I think you kind of need to live across that spectrum. And the problem is a lot of the people probably listening now would be nodding at the pejorative comments about the general stuff and would
Yeah.
probably connect more to the day-to-day hands-on practical. I just ask you to keep an open mind. Like there's a reason why you want to be a little more high level. Like my favorite guy of all, my favorite technologist ever was Richard Feynman. He's the greatest physicist I think who ever lived. And he would always talk about how when people focus too much on the training and then you
Hmm.
and ask them if they really understand, they usually don't. And he never knew the names of things, the specifics, but he knew the concept. And when somebody would say, hey, like, have you ever heard of any, like in this world, if he was a computer science, have you ever heard about the CVE that touches, such and such library? You go, no, I don't know that. And they go, what are you, an idiot? You don't know that. But then if they describe the concept to me, go, oh, and then he'd explain it perfectly,
Mm.
just not in the context of the specifics. That's where academia should be, and that's where education should be. It's just a lot of professors are too lazy to take the time to really know what's going on. So it's a hard thing for those of you listening. I think you should balance the really practical training with trying to take a little dose of some things that have a longer half-life. I do encourage people to go to get a master's degree at your local school. If you work for a company that has tuition reimbursement, go do it. It's not going to be immediately translated to your work today, but I think you'll find that over time you might actually be applying some of those concepts. Like Joe, you read the quote from the that sage, very wise actor, Bruce Willis. Um, but he makes a point, and there might be a time where that would hit your brain, and you'd go, "Oh, that is a good idea," and you'd apply it. But obviously, he's providing this very general stuff. So I think my message is that as you're training a team, as you're educating a team, there's a spectrum, and it would be a mistake to be too biased one way or another. I think you do want to try and make sure there's balance in the way you build your own career and build the careers of the people who work for you. I hope that's helpful advice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think too, Ed, just to go a level deeper, right? Because we have a lot of practitioners, I'm sure, on the line, but also a lot of leaders who are leading organizations. So any change in your advice sort of given those roles, right? People who are in more that, hand-to-hand combat of just trying to keep their head above water. And then the leaders that have to lead and motivate and research and do all of the amazing, wonderful things, but also very time consuming, as we're talking about, when there's 15 different names for the same thing that you have to keep on top of. So any difference in advice is depending on, sort of your level in the organization.
I would always demand that my team do the training with any vendor we're investing in. You know how
Mm.
sometimes like for me, I'm a dad. When I buy, if you buy stuff for the kids and you're putting it together in the garage, you don't read the instructions. You always finish and there's like this little knob that you didn't, you go, where did this thing go? It's
I
done.
think it's
I didn't
the
get to
extra
put all the parts. Like it's like that. Like the first thing managers should absolutely demand. If I invest in a platform, there's always training involved, and that should be some boxes that had better be checked. And no skipping that step. Now, relax, boss. We know how to do this. We don't need to go through that. The answer should be no. You go through the training. So that'd be
just
the.
right.
But then at the other end of the spectrum, I also like to see teams demonstrating to me as manager that you're investing in your career and that you're taking some computer science classes and you're learning about AI and you're doing things that maybe I can't apply immediately, but you'll eventually apply. Like now that I'm at a different part of my career, I find that those general things, like I just brought up Feynman in physics, it had nothing to do with computing. You'll find that those things apply. They have a much longer half-life and they'll apply more generally. So maybe the one to do for people listening, I'll bet a bunch of you are re-signing and renewing licensees. This is a very popular
Mm.
month to be renewing licensees. Go back and look at what it is you look at what you bought and make sure that, item 12C paragraph 4 that says, we'll provide quarterly training to your team. Do it.
Yeah.
Get it on the calendar now. Go schedule that stuff. And you paid for it. You should do it.
Yeah. Well, even the pace of cloud native, right? How fast these things happen. I even think about, and we'll do a little plug for Aqua and Team Nautilus, right? Our threat researchers who are constantly hands in the wild with their honeypots, finding new research. And if you don't follow the thread, again, shameless plug, please, check out our blog for Team Nautilus findings. But, we've even just been talking about how do we get this information and how do we share it and how do you stay on top of it? And so when you have, you know, experts in the field who are delivering this kind of information, making sure, again, not to say here, add something else to your to-do list, but exactly to that point, Ed, like the pace of cloud native, the threat actors that are always getting smarter, it seems, how do you keep on top of all of these different changes? And even if it's just a 5 minute, quick debrief with your team or keeping updated, especially when you have access to these resources, I think is incredibly important, especially in this world and especially in your transformation, how things were in the old world and how they are today in the new world, and how you manage vulnerabilities, cloud native vulnerabilities is a whole different beast that, we understand you're all trying to tackle.
Agree
Ed,
100.
Ed, I got this one from you, but traditional like handover practices that people may have become accustomed to, say, you're working in a DevOps group and or your security team and you get a new hire. How like what does that transition or passing of the keys look like, and how do you ensure that it works well? Because I can't see there being like a blueprint for everyone to just like pick up and just run with.
It depends, right? I mean, when you look at the typical sort of DevOps team or security team, what I've learned is that the way they tend to look is the way the baseball team looked in Sandlot. Remember that movie? Were you guys
Flyers. I always wanted a pair.
did you love that movie? Like
I'm
with
scared of
Benny?
that dog.
You
Yeah.
know the movie Sandlot,
Yep,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if you look at Sandlot, there's one guy on the team that's amazing. There's another couple that are pretty good, like Benny makes the major leagues. The other
Yeah,
two, couple of good players in there. And then a whole team of people that do their work and are helpful and they round out the team, but they're not, that's just there might be other things in their life that they're world class at, but it's not DevOps or it's not
yeah,
security. They just
yeah,
do it for a living. That's how every team looks. And by the way, that's why nation states beat the pants out of so many enterprise security teams because they look like an all-star team and we look like Sandlot. Right? Like that's every team I've ever seen, every team I've ever been part of. That's just a fact. So when you bring somebody in, what are you bringing them in to do? Like,
mm,
did you hire somebody to come in and help clean up your software
Portability.
a little bit and you know that they're an average contributor and that's okay. And you brought them in because it's a somewhat mundane job. You're not paying them a ton of money, but it's something that's been, or are you really bringing somebody in that you expect to be the superstar? Or is
mhm,
it some kid right out of school that was your intern, seemed to work hard? Let's make the intern a developer now, pay them a full salary, and we don't know we're not sure yet. It all depends. Like when you're hiring people as a manager, what are your expectations? Now, what should happen if it was perfect world is that everybody's an A player. You only hire the best. Everybody's going to be great. And anybody I bring in, I have the expectation that they're going to be the best contributor in the whole team. But
yeah,
what really happens in practice, that never happens in practice. And I'm sure everybody listening here knows what I'm talking about. So when you bring somebody in, the question is, what's the expectation? What are you trying to accomplish? Where do you expect those people to fit into the team? What is it you're trying to do? And then the training should be laid out accordingly. That now, if you bring somebody in senior, training shouldn't really be part of the equation. Bringing them in, pay a bunch of money. They've got, 17 years experience in exactly the domain that you're working. Maybe you're an OT team and they used to work at, a car company doing, the chief product security officer. They're coming over. Then
yeah,
they should hit the road running. But if they're coming in with adjacent skills and they've never done what it is you're doing, then you got to train the heck out of them. So,
yeah.
Joe, there's no formula. It really does depend. Aaron, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree, right? And especially, depending on where these people are growing up, right, are cutting their teeth, especially as, again, organizations are shifting. And Joe and I did a webinar a few months ago before the holiday time just on DevSecOps, right? And those changes. And I know we talked to you a lot about that, Ed, right? And just, you know, new world, new methodology, go fast, but stay secure, but bring in automation. And so as you're thinking of teams, right? Like how do these changes sort of bubble down to them? And it's one thing for your leader, right, to say, we want to enact something like a DevSecOps methodology in cloud native because we got to be competitive. We got to get these features out. But oh crap, we had this security issue or this bug, but we got to fix it fast. And, are developers responsible for security? Is this just, the security team? Like it is, it's right. It's this sort of direction. And again, shameless plug. If you haven't watched the DevSecOps webinar, definitely go take a look. But, and just some of these constant questions that I'm sure a lot of folks on the phone have is, we're not just moving technology, but now we have different best practices and different methodologies that we're supposed to implement while doing our day job. While again, if we talk about the core of this webinar, how the heck are we supposed to attack all of these vulnerabilities when they're, going crazy and we're bringing in all this new tech and methodology that we're all supposed to be on top of? So,
I mean, what sucks for developers is that when managers incent things that are visible, like if you told me as a developer, hey, next week we're going to push a new button, you can download PDFs, you'll see it, it's highlighted, it's an enhancement to the UI. Everybody claps, they can't wait to show customers that they've got this new UI button. Great,
yeah.
new feature. But if I say, hey, I just implemented Aqua, we got some better protection here, this is going to help us with our compliance, then they're going to go, oh, when are you going to get to something that I can really care about? Again,
Mhm.
that's what a bad manager would do that because they go, oh, that's like, yeah, I'm glad you're doing that, but when are you going to do a real feature? That's
Yeah.
a bad environment. That's what Agile is all about. It's about
Mm.
changing the culture so that we're incenting and we are rewarding developers for making progress in areas that may not be immediately visible to customers, but boy, they'll be visible to customers if you don't do it.
Right.
So, so that's the problem. I'm sure a lot of people listening work for someone who they just sort of sigh when you say you're going to spend some time on security, but they get excited when there's a visible new feature that
Mhm.
customers can see. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's probably like mindset in the company too, right? Like you have that security
Yes.
first mindset across the board.
Yeah.
Everybody has it. Just got to do your best to try to instill it. But
Mhm.
I want to transition into the final question, and you know, we have to be confident in our ability to reduce risk, to build resilience um, in cloud native with the sheer amount of vulnerabilities and the fact that it just never stops. Like you go to bed and you wake up to I don't know like 500 new vulnerabilities. That's got to be a lot to deal with. Um, how like you know I guess the point that I'm trying to make is like does it does the initial like implementation and the tailored like deployment from the vendor help to make one's life easier down the road? Like how important is that to someone like yourself, Ed? Like the vendor like takes the time to really know, your environment, everyone's different, and they, I don't know, like the white glove service you to make sure that this fits.
I was hoping Bruce Willis would have some advice, but no, no Bruce Willis quote there. Or
Uh,
Demi Moore is not in there either. You don't have any of those. Oh
Find
boy.
a new page.
Hans
Yeah.
Gruber.
I mean, Joe, that's the whole point. Like we're at the point now where automation, and that implies platform. I mean, unless you're writing your own code, you're going to be working with a vendor. That's the way you deal with this. Like if there's what's the point of all this? It's that you got to automate. You have to have some platforms that work. And you better pick your vendors wisely. Like in cloud, there's a couple. You guys are one of them that I would trust. There's a whole long tail of solutions I'd be a little nervous about. But I think as long as you got a reputable vendor that understands the problem, that's you're already halfway down the road toward a solution. What the evilness here is just trying to put something in place where I'm just using a bucket brigade thing, manual bucket brigade ain't gonna work. But picking good platform vendors that are dealing in both real time and also so there's posture and there's real time coverage. You need all of
Mhm.
that stuff in cloud. As
Well,
long as you're thinking along those lines and trying to make sure that the partnerships are good, you shouldn't have to worry about there being 500 new vulnerabilities. That should be taken care of. If that is a problem, then that is the problem. That's the point. Like if you're thinking about that, that's the problem.
Well, and I'd love your take too, Ed. I kind of mentioned this when we started, which I can't believe that was almost 50 minutes ago. But the connection, right? Like it's one thing a lot if even just go, how do I manage these cloud native vulnerabilities? And everybody will say, well, help you prioritize them. But how important to you, especially, in this role, is that connection, right? To be able to take that context of what's really running in the cloud, right? You're running live applications all the way back to the developer, right? That line of code that it was written. How important to you is that, it's changing a mindset, right? Of prioritize just, well, we've ranked these things as critical, go attack the critical. But to what end? Like, how important do you feel is this sort of connection between, what a lot of people claim as code to cloud, but that code to cloud and back, right? That connection of what's running in runtime, what's real, what's severe, what's exposed to the internet, and how can you go and fix it faster with that, exact line of code with that developer.
I mean, that's cybersecurity, Aaron. It's figuring out, picking your battles, and if you're working with a good vendor, then they're going to help make sure that the handful of things that really do matter are the ones that fix. We've all had the experience, for example, of some vendor saying, "Hey, I'll scan your thing." Like they'll say, "I'm going to look at your M365 and tell you where you've misconfigured," and you get a report that has 87,000 things you did wrong. And you might have an out of the box deployment, and you read them all, and maybe you change one thing. Like they got a point there, but then the other 86,000, whatever, you just go, this is all space junk. Welcome to cybersecurity. I mean, that's the problem we've all dealt with. So really, like Joe, your example, like 500 CVs, or vulnerabilities or whatever being reported. You want automation, you want intelligence, you want vendor support to be going through that and bubble up to you the one or two things that really do look like they could be severe issues. And that's what you spend your time doing. And again, even there, automation needs to be the solution. We've got to get away from over dependence on human beings making decisions here. Humans, the people listening, we need to be curating the automation. That's the thought process that should be going in your mind. How do I oversee this? How do I, as a human being, curate that craziness of all that chart that you showed with the CVs? That's what's coming. So you got to curate that. You can't be in the middle of that.
Well, it's complemented by the point you made earlier, right? About your developers, about your teams being trained and educated. And if we can bring in, the mindset shift, right? If we can bring security all the way to the beginning, if we're providing as, leaders of organizations, our development team with these resources, with this training, with, accessing what is available to the vendor, then not only are we tackling sort of this prioritization problem from a context perspective, but also if we're smarter about security and if we have a security first mindset shift, then hopefully the ultimate goal, then less is coming in to begin with. So hopefully there's less that we even have to worry about when we get sort of to the end of the process, right? Or the prioritization list essentially goes down if we're combining exactly what you said, this automation, this education, this security first mindset shift, acknowledging the problem as it is, right? Wow, this is really sucky and this is really hard, but listening, showing up to webinars like this, listening to leaders, having these open discussions, that all makes an impact. So I think those are some really good points.
Joe, I think Aaron just gave you your highlight reel. That was good. That little piece.
I was just thinking about, that's going to make
That's
a nice.
the part that you put, like, the webinar, you put the little snippet up. And I think Aaron's little piece, that was pretty darn
great.
Whatever you just said, that was good. So, but I mean, I think that encapsulates it for sure.
Nice.
Well, team, it's 10 of. I want to leave some time for questions, everybody. Looks like Thomas dropped in the Q&A. Just, yeah, we hear you, Thomas. So, yeah, day 16 of the year, man. It's crazy. All right. Daniel asks, is the recording going to be shared? He needs a link for his manager.
Nice.
There will be. Give me a couple hours and I'll get the link over to your inbox. So
Well, and two, while we're waiting for the questions, right, Joe? Like we talked a lot about problems, right? And Ed gave some wonderful answers of solutions, but there's a part two of this webinar, if I'm
There is.
not mistaken.
Next week, we're going to show you guys this in action, right? So taking these insights and applying them and just showing you how it works. And there's one more question, though, in the chat. Secure by design. Thoughts on it in the cloud?
Well, CISA's made a big deal about that, and I think that that's good. These sort of aphorisms that are filled in with, some examples, I think they're okay. Like the problem with secure by design, it's not a problem, just the situation, is that 10 people will interpret that 10 different ways. Like I'll make a claim. I think I was complaining about something on social media, and somebody was like, well, that's what secure by design is. And then I'll talk about some other completely different thing. And they go, well, that's what they meant by secure by design. And I'll go, okay, what, like what? So I do understand. I've gone through all of that. These are well-meaning concepts. And I think that that's fine. But a lot of times those broad generalisms get applied to an awful lot of different scenarios. So use them as you see fit, but certainly CISA's made a big fuss about it.
All people trying to do good, right? But sometimes
it's all well
many things.
Yeah, hey, look, go team here.
Yeah,
It's
Helping people.
and we're going to see a lot. Obviously, we're filming this beginning of 2025, so we'll see a lot of changes at CISA with the new presidential administration.
Yeah.
See how that goes.
Yeah, we'll have to catch back up on January 16th, 2026 and do a year in review. But yeah, so everyone, I think it's time to run through a quick recap of the takeaways. And the Q&A is still open, so feel free to drop them in there. But thank you again for joining us. And as Aaron said, same time next week, we'll be showing some demos and providing a little more insights into how Aqua can help you with these challenges and innovation and allow you to manage these vulnerabilities with confidence and clarity. So talked a lot about the rise of fake CVEs. It's not just noise. It's definitely a real problem. We've explored how cloud native architecture, it demands new approaches. It's an opportunity to think a little different. And we've heard some strategies to take back control. And I think that also includes the people that are on your team, right? How can you turn them into Spartans from the movie 300? I mean, it's not like David versus Goliath, but we understand how overwhelming it can feel. And as Ed said, there's vendors out there that can help you. Take a look at that contract. If they're offering services, take advantage, or training. I just was talking to Yonir, our curriculum director, and Aaron, he just uploaded your DevSecOps webinar as a course last night.
Nice.
Great guy, yeah. So next week, same time, a little deeper into the how, and provide actually you're going to walk away with a 4-step framework that you can take as a takeaway there.
Yeah. And Svi is our presenter, right? Svi, our wonderful field CISO, CTO, and he has these conversations. He's on site with customers day in and day out. So large, massive enterprise customers who are having these same challenges, and has developed this really effective framework, again, knowing that, not one size fits all, but I think he'll come with some really, really powerful, helpful tips. So that'll be a good one to look into.
He loves questions, so ask him as many questions as you want.
Yes. Yeah. And I wanted to say, Joe, we had a good, Brian just jumped in the Q&A, not a question, but, just sharing with the group that an observation on secure by design is ensure your engineers keep up to date with principles of security and to utilize OWASP as a channel to do so. So great tip, Brian. Thank you.
Ed, Aaron, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for including me. Look forward to the next discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for making the time to join us. See you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.